Well, welcome to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspective on Drought and Hydrological Conditions. This is the September issue. And as normal, this webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of many partners committed to serving the needs of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and its people. The next regularly scheduled webinar is 1 month from now on October 5th. As always, a Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing. And the webinar is also being live streamed on the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. And the webinar archive is available, so you can view prior months' webinar series on the Kentucky Climate Center YouTube channel. So with that, let me continue. So just a quick outline of this. We'll go through recent conditions, some recent impacts, the outlooks going ahead, and then a summary and questions at the end. A few photos there. On the left, Nicholas County, you see a roll cloud rolling in a couple of weeks ago. And then in Bath County on the lower left, you see this was just a week ago. You see a nice, I'm guessing a soybean field there with some nice fog. Although I'm not sure if that's a sunrise or sunset. I think it's a sunrise. Well, jumping right in here with taking a look at the August temperatures, we actually had a pretty near normal August. It tied for the 58th warmest August on record. It was just 0.1 degrees above normal. And you see the photo in the upper left shows over most of the state, it was average to even slightly cool for an average temperature. Now, if we look at the maximum temperatures during August, we were actually quite cool, 1 to 2 degrees or more below normal for a lot of the state. But as many of you recognized, it was the humidity that we felt during August. And I don't know if you guys see my face or if you see the minimum temperatures there, somehow, for some reason, it put a picture of me on the screen this time. Hadn't done that before, so it must be a new feature on Zoom. But the minimum temperatures were above average, and again, that's because of the humidity we had during the month of August. So a little more humid than we're used to seeing. The climate divisions of the eastern and western portions of the state were below normal temperature-wise, but the center of the state, the bluegrass, the south central portions of the state were 0.7 to 0.6 degrees above normal. And again, it was the humidity we remember from August. And this was, I believe, our hottest day during the month. This was August 25th, and you see the daytime high heat indices there. I think Henderson, Union County take the prize there with a 120-degree heat index. I believe that was the hottest that we saw. I know some other states exceeded even that, but for Kentucky for the summer, that was quite warm. And it looks like Pike County out in the east takes the winner circle with the 88. I think we would have taken that instead of 120 any day. And if we look at the summer as a whole, June, July, and August combined, it was actually quite a pleasant summer. Temperature-wise, we had about almost a half degree below normal, 0.4 degrees below normal for a statewide average. But because of the bias and the way that the averages are computed, that still made it the 34th warmest on record. But overall, it was still a relatively, going by the latest 30-year normals, we were, again, relatively cool. And that applied to both the daytime highs and the nighttime lows. If we look at the nighttime highs, we were again 1 to 2 degrees below average. Nighttime lows, we were also below average, although not by not quite as much. But overall, quite a pleasant summer. But despite the cooler summer or near normal summer, we were still roughly the fourth warmest year on record for Kentucky, and that's largely due to the very warm, I believe, 7 to 8 degrees above average that we had in January and February. And so we started off the year tied for the second warmest year on record. We've now fallen to tying for fourth warmest on record at 1.7 degrees above normal. But that's we're falling quite a bit from where we were, but we're still in that top 5 warmest years, again, because of the way we started the year. Now, if we look at switching over to precipitation, just starting within the last few days, again, you know, it's what we normally see in the summertime. It's a lot of hit and miss storms. It's a lot of convection. And particularly the trend we've seen over the last month or so, we've seen, again, quite a bit of heavy rain in the Jackson Purchase area, Western Kentucky. And then by the time it gets to Central Kentucky, it either washes out, fades out, or just doesn't make it there at all. And so here you see the precipitation totals for the last 2 days, and you see a big portion of Central Kentucky just missed out on that. Now, this morning I woke up to more convection along the eastern edge of the state, and you see some of that reflected there in the 0.86 inches there in the northeast. But for the most part, much of the state missed out on these rains we've had in the last few days. Here in Bowling Green, we received a half an inch, and then portions west of there, quite a bit more, portions east of that, quite a bit less. And if we go back the last week, now this is before the last 2 days. This is from a couple of days ago, going back the prior week. We see, again, the same trend. We see portions of eastern Kentucky had some rain up to roughly half an inch or so. And then far western Kentucky got a little bit, but not a whole lot of rain across the state for the prior week. And if we go back to a 2-week period, August 22nd through September 4th, we see, again, kind of the same trend. The central portion of the state getting actually very little, and then roughly around Louisville area, it points east and west from there. And then, but portions of far western Kentucky, of course, getting several inches of rain, and unfortunately areas to the east and northeast Kentucky seeing quite a bit. And then if we go back to the 30-day period, we see actually quite a bit more rain statewide. Again, little lower areas, lower amounts in central Kentucky, but for August, for the summertime here, not terrible. And then we go back 2 months, again, kind of the same trend. The heaviest amounts east and portions of western Kentucky, and then portions of the east, northeast Kentucky. Pretty scattered, pretty convective, somewhat like you'd expect. And then we go back, again, this is pretty much the summer, the last 3 months, and we see, for this time of year, quite a bit above normal, at least for some areas. And with the Jackson Purchase area taking the most with that record rainfall that they had. And then amounts decreasing as you go east, especially as you get further to the northeast and east edges of the state. Now, if we look at accumulated amounts collected over the last month, we see on the left, again, a lot like we've discussed over the last month, we've seen, again, heavy rainfall over the Jackson Purchase area, west from Bowling Green, and then and across even areas of southeastern Kentucky. But as you move north, quite a bit less rain, especially over the bluegrass area. And then as a percent of normal, again, even over 200-300% of average across the Jackson Purchase, western Kentucky, And then as you get, especially around the bluegrass region, Lexington to Covington, quite a bit below normal in at least a few counties. And then as we look at the summer as a whole, again, most of the state, or at least a large portion of the state, received at least over 10 inches, and with some areas receiving even over 20. And then as a percentage of normal, again, most of the state was above normal for the summer, whereas some areas are far above normal, especially over the Jackson Purchase area. And so looking at the numbers, the state as a whole for the last month for August averaged 4.5 inches of rainfall, which was 0.92 inches above normal. And that's for a statewide average, which puts us at 126% of average. But again, looking at the spatial plot, that's kind of biased. Those numbers are somewhat biased by the heavy rainfall over Western Kentucky. Quite a bit less over the rest of the state, although still not terrible. Now these numbers put us, August is the 32nd wettest August on record out of the 129 years, although again, much of the state was much closer to that average number. And when you look at the summer as a whole, we've averaged roughly 14.5 inches of precipitation across the state, which puts us at over 2 inches, 2.5, close to 2.5 inches above normal, which puts us at 120% of normal and the 30 wettest on record. And I should say, all the climate divisions of the state were above normal. So even portions of the bluegrass. And as we see here, the U.S. Drought Monitor had no drought, not even abnormally dry soils for the state of Kentucky. Now, as we will see, there's quite a bit drier weather probably expected within the next week or two, and some areas missed out on the rains the last few days. So I think we'll start to see at least portions of central Kentucky and start to become abnormally dry, listed as abnormally dry, and maybe even a little drought creep back in here for the month of September. But we'll see how that unfolds. But definitely some areas to the west still struggling. Some relief across middle portions of the country, across the plains, but they're still dealing with some pretty severe drought in some areas of Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, especially Wisconsin, Minnesota. They've dealt with drought on and off for quite a while now. And of course, Texas and the consecutive 100-degree days they've had now pretty much all summer. Very severe drought in portions of central and southeast Texas and Louisiana. But fortunately for Kentucky and in Tennessee, no drought for us quite yet. And again, for I believe a little portion of southeast Kentucky here abnormally dry, but otherwise a clear slate for this week. Again, that will probably change next week, but for now, we're pretty good. And when we look at the change over the last summer, we started the summer quite a bit of drought across portions of central U.S. and even central Kentucky. And since that time, of course, we've had quite a bit of rain over these areas shown in the green. Quite a bit of improvement across the Ohio, Tennessee valleys, even the Northeast, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and quite a bit of improvement across the plains. But you see worsening conditions across, of course, again, Texas and the northern plains. But Kentucky, again, it was a good summer of improvement from where we stood 12 weeks ago, where it looked like at least beginning of spring was pretty dry. And taking a look at the soil moisture, again, it's kind of highlighting those areas struggling with drought across the central plains. Kentucky, a little dryness shown there. I think some of that's artificial, but for the most part, we're in good shape, especially as you go across much of the South. We look to be in pretty good shape. The soil moisture ranking percentile, again, another way of looking at this, shows Kentucky in good shape, especially over areas, southern, southwestern areas of the state. And again, highlighting those areas of drought to the north central plains and southern Texas. When we look at the stream flows across the state, we're in pretty good shape. A few streams here and there show a bit of dryness, but overall, very good stream flows, especially for this time of year. 28-day average showing pretty much the same thing. Pretty good rainfalls across the state, pretty good stream flows across the state. And again, when we look at the evaporative demand drought index, the EDDI, again, this is highlighting partly just the summer demand, with the heat that we've had over much of the country over the season, in some cases seasonal heat, but it is August and the evaporative demand is high. And again, you see the very hot sunny weather and the impact it's had across the deep south, across Texas, Louisiana, and again over the northern plains as well. But high demand here, but again, with the rainfall we've had, we're doing okay. And if you're a fan of the gosh, I forget the name of it now, the festival in Nevada, you can see they've had an unusually wet season out west. Burning Man Festival, that's it. Now, taking a look again closer at home with the soil moisture, just a few random locations here, and this is over the summer period. We see, starting with Bully County, during the spring or during June, we were able to wetten up, and at all levels, you see some drying through the summer, through July and August, and you see the 2-inch, 4-inch, we go through these spells. Every time we start to get dry, fortunately, we've had a good rain. And at least in the case of most of these stations, the deeper soil layers have stayed relatively moist. You see 40 inches, 20 inches have, in this case, yeah, the 40-inch and 8-inch have been pretty moist, some drying over time, but fairly steady. And in Graves County, especially at 40 inches, it's remained pretty moist throughout the summer. And the upper layers, for the most part, as we've dried down, we'll get a rainfall that'll restore that. We'll dry down, then get a rainfall. So we've never stayed dry for a terribly long period of time. And the rains seem to be hitting when we need them the most. Same with Lewis County. This is a good example where the lower depths at 40 and 20 have remained relatively moist, and whereas the upper layers have dried, but they haven't stayed dry for terribly long before we get a rain that replenishes that. During August, you have seen some drying overall, but and so right now we are, at least in Lewis County, the driest we've been for a while. Same with Bully County. And again, with Owsley County, it shows something similar, relatively moist at the lower depths and staying there, the upper depths going through these cyclical drying spells. But overall, not bad for summer for here. Now, as far as the storm reports from the last 30 days, compared to some of our previous months, relatively quiet, but we still had 2 tornado touchdowns in far northeastern Kentucky, and but more widespread thunderstorm winds, thunderstorm gusts. I know even here I had some tree damage, but and then some flash flooding across areas of southwestern Kentucky. But overall, a fairly quiet month as you'd expect in August, although with some widespread damaging winds. Fortunately, nothing terribly significant. Oh, that's right. That's right. There were two tornadoes in Fulton and Hickman County. I think they got covered up here. So altogether, we did have four tornadoes for the month. And I forgot to mention those. It did get covered up by the other icons here, but that's correct. And taking the long view going back to January, this is a plot showing the thunderstorm and tornado warnings going back to the beginning of this year in comparison to previous years. And you see that this is from the Paducah office, and you see, boy, they're just blowing it out of the water this year as far as the number of warnings compared to previous years, where the maximum was roughly a little over 300 for this time of year. So far this year, they're well over 500. And again, this does not even include the flood warnings, flood watches that the flood warnings that they've issued. But yeah, far above previous years. And going over to the Louisville office, a little less dramatic, but still in the top 4 years, maybe top 3 now, and just behind 2015, 2018. So some pretty good company there. But go back to 2021, and it was a record low, and we ended up with the December tornadoes. So it's not really a predictor of anything, but it's interesting to see where we stand relative to other years. And I think the insurance companies across Kentucky would attest to these numbers, especially with all the wind damage we've seen across the state. And in the Jackson office, again, they're probably tied for second in these last 10 years or so, and tied with 2015 now for the number of tornado and thunderstorm warnings. So we're now switching to ag. Here's a picture from our newest mesonet station at Spindletop in Fayette County. Again, this was just from a few weeks ago. A nice, beautiful view there, I believe looking north, and some light fog there in the early morning. But a beautiful station there on the University of Kentucky property. So some regional impacts. Overall, conditions are good. Upper left, the corn conditions are relatively good. 71% of corn across the state are rated as good to excellent. And it looks like the further east you go, are the better, and the further west you go, again towards the plains, the worse those numbers become. And the corn progress, right on schedule, pretty much. 72% are dented at this point, this stage, and which is pretty much on schedule. The conditions of soybeans are also 70% are rated good to excellent. Again, that's similar to, I believe, previous years here. And of course, as you drive west or northwest, those numbers go down and go up slightly east or south of here. And again, the soybean progress is just now starting to drop the leaves there. And again, for corn harvesting, we're just getting started on that. Maybe slightly behind the 5-year average, slightly behind last year, but just getting that underway, especially with the nice weather ahead. I think you'll see that catching up nicely. And the condition of the corn crop, it's better than it was, say, a month ago. It's improved somewhat, and overall fairly good, good to excellent overall. And the Kentucky tobacco harvest is started behind, but we've been able to catch up with the nice weather we've had over the last several weeks for the most part, and the dry weather for a lot of the state. And so we're may even be slightly ahead now in the tobacco harvest. And again, with soybeans just getting started there. And here's just a table showing the crop progress. And you see we're pretty much on schedule with both the 5-year average and compared to last year's numbers. So we're slightly behind in progress of the corn, slightly behind the and soybeans, but pretty much right on schedule for the most part. And the crop conditions, again, for the most part, pretty good. Most are good to excellent. The hay, somewhat variable depending on where you are in the state. Livestock is mostly good. Pasture, again, some areas aren't seeing the rainfall, and so I think that may account for part of that. There was some periods of dryness that have impacted. I've heard that second cutting, but overall the crops are pretty good. And again, the subsoil moisture, the percent short to very short. We are drying out some, and but we're in better shape than a lot of areas. But I think we may see some additional drying moving forward. And so looking forward now, this is the QPF 7-day total. Now, this was from September 5th, so this pretty much includes the rains we've already received. So looking ahead, I don't expect we'll add what we've received in this last 48-hour period. It looks like more improvement over the Central Plains, maybe some improvement across the Northern Plains, but not a whole lot more for us to speak of in the next week. Now, if we go to the 6 to 10-day outlook, we see that actually they're forecasting quite a bit below normal temperatures. As if you've seen the week-long forecast, and our temperatures over the next week are going to be absolutely beautiful for this time of year. And the precipitation outlook, it listed as near normal. Again, I don't think we'll add to what we've received over the last 48 hours, which means if you're over the central portion of the state, maybe this should be below normal. But this is the 6 to 10-day outlook, so maybe there's something on the later end of this, September 11th, September 15th, where we could see some rains. But above normal to the west and east of us, probably near normal for us. Now we extend that out a little further. They are predicting our temperatures to persist as below normal, right over bullseye, right over Kentucky there. I'll take that in September. And but then you see this below normal precip starting to creep into western portions of the state, where the Jackson Purchase, maybe that's okay. Other areas of the state could probably use a little more rain. And but you see above normal for the eastern edge of the state. So we'll see how that falls out. And then month as a whole, looking ahead, have now this was issued a little earlier than the 1 to 2 week outlooks, but this has the entire center portion of the country is above normal, including Kentucky. And so we'll see if that pans out. It could happen that the latter half of September is far above normal, in which case we end the month above normal. But right now, that doesn't look like that will be the case. And you see they have a big part of the country with below normal precip for September. Again, this is contrary to the prior forecast that had above normal for the east and central portions of the state. So for the country. So we'll see how this falls out. Though to me, the monthly outlook doesn't necessarily jive with what they're predicting for the next couple of weeks, but we'll see. Again, the latter half of the month could be quite a bit different. And looking at the season as a whole, they have us as normal to above normal chances for warm temperatures, and above normal precip for most of the state. In fact, it's good, and that includes a lot of our drier areas of the state. So again, they're continue to forecast a a wet fall for us. So a wet September, October, November. So we will see how that follows out. And looking long term, for the winter, they have us as equal chances for above or below normal precipitation. But then in the spring, they're predicting a wet spring for Kentucky and a wet summer for next year for Kentucky, for the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. And then in the fall after that, equal chances for above or below normal. So again, they continue to forecast this. This is something we've seen for several months now, this bullseye of wet weather for the Ohio and Tennessee valleys for the months to come. So we'll see if that persists. And that is somewhat contrary to what we would expect from an El Nino pattern, which I'll talk about now. We have a 95% chance of the current El Nino continuing through at least February of next year. So we can expect this to continue. Now, this is a composite of all the El Ninos on the left and all the El Ninos, La Ninas on the right for the November through March averages. And what we see on the left is for El Nino, we expect the state to be largely below normal or precip. So in a typical El Nino year, we would expect a drier than normal Kentucky for the November through March period. And whereas most of the coastal areas of the country would see above normal. So is that what's forecast? Well, let's first look at, just the fall period for your typical El Nino. And on the left, what you have is the temperature forecast. And their forecast, it looks like in a typical El Nino year, Kentucky and areas to the east and the far southwest are actually cooler than normal. And if we look at the precipitation on the right, we see again, Kentucky is typically, not always, but typically drier than normal during the fall. And this seems like a pretty strong signal. And this again includes 30 years, the last 30 years of El Ninos, 30-year period in the El Ninos within that. So again, we don't have that large of a sample size, but it does seem fairly consistent. So we'll see. The NOAA's predictions are an average to wetter than normal fall and winter period. But the record, in the past El Ninos, they typically bring us with drier weather. So we'll see. Now, the monthly drought outlook, fortunately, Kentucky is not included in that. They are forecasting expanding drought across the central U.S. in areas currently not in drought. So they are expecting, even over this coming month, to see an expansion of drought. And when we go to the 3-month outlook, again, no real change there other than a few small additions to that. So expanding drought over much of the country, but fortunately, Kentucky is not included in that. We look at the fire potential outlook, and again, areas to the mid-Atlantic states, areas to across the deep south, areas across the north central, areas currently in drought, but not including Kentucky. And so the Ohio, Tennessee valleys are not included in that. And that's good to see. So with a summary, after a hot start to 2023, temperatures have moderated closer to average. We've had a fairly seasonable spring and definitely a nice and seasonable summer, punctuated by a couple of hot spells, but for the most part, average to below normal even. But all that said, we still remain the 4th warmest year on record, again, because of that very hot January and February. And so summer 2023 was cool, 0.4 degrees below average and wet, almost 2.5 inches above normal. And so the state as a whole saw 120% of its normal precipitation during the month. And a few periods were marked by this high humidity. And it continues, fortunately, Kentucky, for the most part, continues to get rain when it's needed, albeit some areas are remaining dry due to the high seasonal ET demand and the hit and miss convective rains. I think the last 48 hours have been a good example of that. And with a fall outlook, it's forecasts continue to point to mild to maybe warm temperatures over September, although next few weeks will be below normal. And it looks like a dry, maybe dry to normal September, followed by a wet October and November going forward. And NOAA forecast El Nino to continue at least through February, if not longer. And again, typically that means dry winter weather for Kentucky, but contrary to that, the NOAA's long-range forecasts are pointing to normal to above normal precipitation for both Kentucky for both the spring and the for winter and spring, and even going into next summer. So with that, I'll stop, and my apologies, I can't see the chat at the same time. Oh, yep, just a reminder, our next regularly scheduled webinar is 1 month from now, October 5th, and that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And if you do have any feedback, feel free to contact me, Jerry Brodsky, or Matt Dixon at U of K, Bill Caldwell, or Chip Zimmer at the Division of Water. And if you do have a drought to report, feel free to report that. That provides a lot of useful information in order to really monitor hydrologic conditions at your local level. And so these reports are extremely helpful in providing us with feedback to what's going on across the state. So with that, thank you again for joining us, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing, and we can answer questions and discuss. So let me go ahead and stop sharing, and let me pull up the I don't know if this recorded or not, but it looked like it had paused for some reason. So any questions? I know some of our regulars are out on travel today, so we don't have everybody here that we normally have. Let me go to the chat. That's a good point. Thomas Miller said, accumulated rainfall doesn't tell the whole story for the Jackson purchase. We were right behind in April, May, and June. That is true. That's a good point. And that yep, in Graves County, soil moisture, the dry conditions and high temperatures hit critical times in the growing season. And yep, D1 conditions creeping into Harlan and Letcher counties along the Virginia border. Oh, right. Yeah, this morning's drought monitor did show that. Right. So I forget what if they received anything in yesterday's rains, but it may have been north of there. And the comment about the river levels, yeah, I did see one headline about that, causing some issues with the barge traffic. So it'll be interesting to see, to monitor those river levels going forward, especially with the 7-day forecast that we have, 7 to 10 day forecast. Any other questions or comments? Thanks for these updates. These are helpful. Any other questions? Thank you again for
Jimmy?
joining. Oh, yes.
No, I was just going to say, since nobody had any comments, I just want to thank you again for doing these each and every month.
No, thank you for joining. And again, your feedback from the really helps us convey up the chain the conditions across the state, and these are helpful or more helpful for us just to be able to connect with you guys. So thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, well, thank you again, and look forward to seeing you again next month. Thank you.